All right.
Hello, everyone.
How are we all doing here today? We are going to go through a lot of stuff today. So go ahead and put your name in the chat and let us know who you are, where you're coming from. And let's go ahead and make sure that we use that to your advantage. Put any kind of thoughts and comments that you have in there as we go through this. So we're going to be covering a lot of information today. So we are Sing for Your Lives. My name is Dr. Graham Anduri.
And I'm Dr. Stephanie Anduri.
Some of you have seen us and worked with us before. Some of you have not, but we are Sing for Your Lives is a organization that we started a few years ago with the mission of making the world a better place through singing. And so one of the ways that we really endeavored to do that is by using singing as a means of self-discovery. And so that's what we're doing today. This workshop is Discover Your Voice, Discover Yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to say all the time that our voices are the sonic manifestations of ourselves, of our souls. So it makes so much sense that in finding the things that are blocking us vocally, we also find the things that are blocking us from living the life that we dream of, from doing all of the things, pursuing all of the things that we hope to do.
Absolutely. So go ahead if you will. Make sure we let everybody in. Go ahead and put in the chat what do you feel like are the things that vocally are that you're running into a kind of a roadblock with? What are the things that are holding you back from expressing your voice to its fullest extent? And do you have any thoughts about how that might relate to the ways that you're not able to fully live your life the way that you would want to? Because that's really what we're going to be diving into.
Yeah.
The ways that we go about this are we talk about kind of four different pillars of how we teach the voice, and that goes through the body, that goes through the mind, the heart, and spirit. So we're gonna hit some little examples for each one of these. We have way more than we'd possibly be able to do in a 1 hour workshop, but we're gonna give you little snippets of each of these things. And a lot of this is stuff that we have just started uncovering for ourselves recently. Some things that we've been experimenting
Yeah.
in our own lessons, in our own singing for our own voices, in our students, and so we're really excited to share a lot of this stuff with you all.
Absolutely. One of the things that we have noticed as singers ourselves is that much of the pedagogy out there tells us what we should do, but not what we're doing to prevent that thing from happening. So, like a teacher will tell us, sing legato or something that is the effect of what you're trying to achieve without addressing the thing that we are doing in our bodies that is preventing that from happening. And the same is true of life, right? We all have all of these things that we want to achieve, but we don't know what is in our way. We don't know what is stopping us or what thought patterns, what, habits we have that are holding us back from achieving freedom in all of these different ways. And so that's really what our approach is.
Mhm. Right. So when we're going to start with body, and when we talk about addressing the voice through the body, there's a whole bunch of different points that we talk about here as well. We talk the biggest one is alignment, and this is really the foundation of our pedagogy is how is your body aligned? How are we using our body mechanically the way that we need to? And oftentimes we find that we're actually not using it the way that we need to, and so it takes some realigning of what we do. We also talk in a lot of our other materials, our other workshops, we talk about breath, we talk about laryngeal release, we talk about resonance. We're not going to have time to get into all of those today, but if you're interested in seeing where we have some more of those materials, let us know. We can send you towards some of that stuff. But today we're going to talk a little bit about alignment, and there are multiple points of alignment that we focus on in our body. The one that we're going to really focus on today that we found has some huge implications for the way that we sing, but also the way that we move through our lives is your hips. So if your hips are out of whack, everything else is out of whack, basically. And if you can try this. In fact, I want you to try all of these things for yourself wherever you are. Go ahead and stand up in your room, in your office, wherever you might be. And we're just going to experiment with some different hip placement and see how it affects the rest of your body and see how it affects your voice. So when you stand, we have these 6 different points of alignment. You have your I'm going to give this one away. We usually make a fun thing out of this, but
We do.
the place where your spine meets your skull is actually right in between your earlobes. Most
Not-
people think it's
yeah.
back here. It's not. It's right in between your earlobes. So that's called your atlanto-occipital joint. Below that, the next point is your shoulders. Below that, we have the middle of your spine, right behind your solar plexus. We're going to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah.
You have your hips, which your hip joint is actually a little lower than you might think. It's not the pelvic bone that you feel sticking out right here. It's down where your leg joint or your leg bone creates a joint with your hip bone. And then you have your knees and then the balls of your feet. We want all of those points to be lined up. We want them to be in alignment. Well, the hips are the center point of that whole thing. And so if the hips are either, usually a lot of people have them tucked under like this, tucked forward, then you can see the rest of my body is totally out of alignment. Conversely, if you do what my wife calls, I'm going to give me your special term here.
Kardashianing or duck butting are my 2 words for this.
Right.
And we see this, I would say, probably 90-ish% of people in female bodies end up walking around with their hips locked back, and there are many reasons why, and we'll delve into some of that a little bit today. So go ahead and bring your hips into both of those positions, kind of go back and forth between being too far forward and then also rotating back. And notice what you feel in your body with each. Notice what has to happen, in what ways you have to compensate with the rest of your alignment, with your muscles, with your core muscles, especially if your hips are out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
If your hips tend to sway backwards in the Kardashian position, notice what happens when you try to release your jaw, and then bring your hips into a balanced position with your jaw still released, and see what a difference it makes in your jaw when you do that. It's because your hips and your AO joint, which is right here, kind of right behind your jaw, right? Those are at opposite ends of your spine. And so we don't think about all of the implications. How many of us, just let us know in the chat, how many of us have been in a voice lesson at some point that we've been told to release our jaws? You've got jaw tension. Exactly. Hips, Maddie said, hips back equals jaw locked. That's exactly right.
Bingo.
Yep, absolutely. But hips forward can also have a negative impact on jaw, on tongue root, on all kinds of things. And so finding balance at that point really allows us to balance the alignment in the rest of our bodies as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's put it into practice and do some singing with this.
I'm going to scooch over to the other chair so that they can still see you.
All right. Cool. So we're just going to do some real simple, some scale warm-ups here just to show you how this stuff applies. Now you can do this you can do these kinds of exercises with any warm-up that you like. You can sing songs of your choosing, but just for the sake of keeping it simple, we're just going to do just a 5-note scale like that. And we're going to start with you can choose, let's go ahead and let's start with our hips tucked forward like this, tucked under. Notice what happens. Your knees will kind of have to bend, and your front body kind of collapses forward in on itself this way. Your head ends up having to come forward. And just notice what that feels like as you sing. Notice how your breath feels, your breath capacity, your ability to expand. Notice what's happening just throughout the whole mechanism.
And beyond that, I want to take one moment for you to recognize what you feel psychologically, emotionally, when your body closes in this direction. Mm-hmm. Each of these different alignment imbalances can create a psychological and emotional reaction in us as well. And we will talk about that a bit, but there is a whole wealth of information and research done on that.
Yeah. So be the observer. Here we go. take stock of what that felt like, I had to like really consciously stay in that because it was really uncomfortable for me. But let's go the opposite direction now and go ahead and we'll do the Kardashian thing here and stick your butt out. Feel that kind of, there's a really strong arch in the lower back when this happens.
I always feel a lot of pressure in my lumbar spine when
Yeah.
I'm bringing my hips out of alignment.
If it's uncomfortable, if it's painful, you don't have to push it. This can be uncomfortable if you do this too much.
But
you're also
most of us
fine-
walk around like this all day. So just if you wear heels, I can almost
Oh, yeah.
guarantee that you're walking around with your hips out of alignment.
You'll also find that your knees just kind of automatically lock in this position. That's a good way for you to notice if your hips are used to being back like this, your knees will lock. And just notice what happens to your chest, notice what happens to your head position. Okay, so let's do that same thing again and notice if this feels different to sing in this position. Here we go. Any differences between those two, put them in the chat. Let us know what you observed. Now, we're going to bring it back into balance. We're going to bring those hips into a balanced place where it's not too far forward, it's not too far back, but there's this nice little floaty spot where everything feels like there's no more pressure anywhere in your back. Your core muscles are able to just totally release and relax because they're not necessary to hold your body up anymore. And see what happens to the rest of your body when that alignment is allowed to be there. See how it affects your voice as well. As you're doing this, notice if this balanced alignment and open position in your body changes the way that you feel physically, but see if it changes the way that you feel emotionally and psychologically. Okay, here we go.
Was.
What did you feel that was different about that balanced approach versus the imbalanced approaches? Did you notice a difference in the way that your voice was able to function? Did you notice a difference in what your voice sounded like, what it felt like? Put it in the chat, blow that thing up, and let's see what y'all came up with. The other point of alignment while you're doing that, while you're putting your thoughts down, is this mid spine one, and this isn't one that we focused on. It's not one that I've focused on as much in previous workshops and previous things we've done, but it's something that we've been talking a lot about lately, specifically because of the implications it has on how we move through the world, how we move through our life. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I sort of we just ran a summer festival in Germany for a month. And then before that one in Alabama for a couple of weeks with emerging professional singers. And as we were doing this, I sort of started to sense, I'm a very intuitive person. I sort of started to sense that some of the singers were struggling with technical language, and that as we've done our work through Sing for Your Lives at recognizing the spiritual and the emotional implications of singing more freely, of finding alignment in our bodies and in our lives, it occurred to me that each of these, in Eastern philosophies, there is the concept of chakras, and chakras are energy centers. These energy centers were not sort of like discovered necessarily or like created by Eastern philosophies, but were sort of noticed by them. Each of these energy centers correlates with a nerve bundle in our bodies, which, when it's stimulated, activates the release of different chemical hormone.
There's sort of these neuroendocrine centers, that bundles of nerves and endocrine glands that correlate to each of those different energy points
Yeah,
that are described.
absolutely. And so very often we see singers close off right here in the solar plexus, and they tend to sort of collapse in this direction. Sometimes this is because they're so tight that they are, closing everything off because they feel like that's how they're supposed to support the sound. Other times it's a means of being vulnerable. We see singers all the time stand like this with their hands crossed in front of their bodies right at that point. And the thing is that point is not just a physical point in our bodies. It is the point where we experience trust. And when we have anxiety, when we have nervousness about something that's about to happen, we experience sensation right at that point in our bodies. If you have dealt with anxiety, if you've dealt with worry a lot, then you probably recognize that is a place where you have felt tight or uncomfortable at various points in your life. And so almost always when singers are closed off at this point, when they're out of balance, when they're collapsed, or when they're compressed at that point, it's not just a physical thing. It comes from a desire to protect themselves. They don't trust their voices. They don't trust the audience's reaction. And so when we just address this from a place of, just the body, we miss out on the opportunity of understanding the root cause of all of this. But for now, let's just play with it a little bit.
Sure. The other part of that, think about, you can all try this wherever you are. Stand with a collapsed position so that this part of your body is kind of concave, is caving in on itself. And just notice what this body language communicates. Notice it what you see me doing. How does this body language communicate the way that I might feel, the way that I might be moving through the world? Versus what does a more open, expansive position in my body communicate? And how does it feel physically to you?
That's the one I was going to talk about.
Do you notice an emotional difference between this and this?
Go into a closed off position for a few seconds. We'll wait for everyone to kind of just feel that. And as you close off at that spot, as you cross your body or close it off in any direction, that you can, notice how your spirit changes. Notice how your confidence changes. Notice if you feel a little less energized, a little less excited. A little more worried. I just felt that. That was strange. And then we're gonna open that up so that point in your body, your solar plexus, right in there, is allowed to expand as you breathe.
And so it's not just here, but the rest of your body is as well. You're allowed to take up more space.
Yeah.
And see what that just physically feels more expansive, but this just feels more. And there actually, we talk about this a lot. There are studies that have been done to show that there is an immediate difference in the balance of hormones that your body produces in each of these positions. That you produce more cortisol in this closed off position, more testosterone in this more open, expansive position.
That Red Smith says spinal fluid is open to flow, floods the energy centers. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and also it activates the vagus nerve at various points. The vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve in our bodies, and it is what brings us out of fight or flight mode into rest and digest mode.
Yeah. So let's try some singing with this point of alignment as our main focus. We'll move through this kind of quickly again, but go ahead and start with that more collapsed, closed off position. This is kind of like I see students like this all the time, especially choir students. They've got their choir folder in hand and they're doing this kind of thing. time. All right, let's try it.
Good. So two things that that Leah Hess said. The first thing was that her voice felt looser when she had her hips in balance. The second thing that was really interesting, she said it's difficult to push her voice through her body when she's collapsed at that point. Of course it is. We can't breathe. We can't allow the air to move through us when our bodies are closed off.
And here's the fun thing. When everything is lined up the right way, which we're about to experience again, you don't have to push your voice through anything.
You just allow
your voice to come through.
Yeah.
So let's try that. So now refine that balanced hip position, but also that balanced position, that more open, expansive position. You don't have to overdo it. You don't have to over-rotate. You shouldn't, but just find where everything is balanced and aligned and open and expansive, and let's see what that feels like in contrast. Good. Let us know in the chat what you felt differently about that one.
Absolutely.
I felt a huge difference. Just my jaw was able to let go.
I could hear that difference. Lindsay said, opening the chest feels too vulnerable and unprotected. Yes, it does. That is sort of the point.
That's our discovering yourself part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The vulnerability is such a crucial part of being a singer and being a performer, being an artist of any kind, but it can be the most difficult thing to overcome, is that fear of vulnerability.
Yes.
So think about this for a second. This part of your body is perhaps the most physically vulnerable part, right? There's no bones here to protect anything. Your rib cage protects a lot of your vital organs, the upper part of your body, your heart, your lungs, from getting hit, from getting collapsed, from getting damaged in any way. But everything below that is really pretty, there's just soft, fleshy tissue. There's not a lot of physical armor built up around the rest of our organs. So this is the most physically vulnerable part of our bodies. And so if we're feeling vulnerable emotionally or in any other way, this tends to be an automatic physical response to protect that part of our bodies, to protect that vulnerable part of who we are.
This is also why people cross their arms when they're in an argument with someone.
And so, allowing for that vulnerability can be a really scary thing.
Yeah.
Because what if we get hurt? What if we get? What if somebody is on the offensive? What if somebody tries to attack us and attack some part of our voice? Which unfortunately can be the case sometimes with people who don't know. They don't know the effect of their words. They don't know how to be kind people. But man, the difference between protecting and allowing that vulnerability is night and day.
Right. And the point is using your voice even when you're afraid of it, freeing your voice even when you're afraid of it. Right.
Leah said it's conscious work to stay neutral.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anytime you have a new thing that you're implementing, a new technique, a new habit that you're trying to create, you're overriding that subconscious programming that you've habituated a certain way of doing things in your body, in your mind, in your emotions. And so that just comes naturally. You don't have to think about it. As soon as you start to try something different that overrides that, you do have to be very conscious and intentional about what you're doing to maintain that new pathway, that new, you're creating new neural pathways by doing that. Once you do that enough, once you're intentional and conscious about making that the way that you do things, if you do that enough times, that becomes your new habit, and you don't have to be quite so focused on it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Red said before, he said that you had to work to stay neutral. It's like fighting to stay on a balance beam. Absolutely. We have all this muscle memory learned in, and it doesn't just go away. And then later he said, yeah, but the point is that fear is inauthentic. And for me, I found when I face the fear, it only exists in my imagination. The fear becomes the raw material for a breakthrough. It does.
Big time.
That is beautiful. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Challenges. So we talk a lot about the idea of the hero's journey. And I don't know if you know what that is, but most stories throughout history have been based on this idea of the hero's journey, most movies, most books. And the idea is that our hero goes out on a journey to find something. You're better at explaining this because you have performed on it a bunch.
Right. I mean, it's that we could do multiple workshops on the hero's journey alone, but essentially that you have to go through some hardships, some trials, some tribulations to have a growth experience, and you come back to where you were before, changed, transformed, and renewed.
And so there's this cycle. There's a Japanese, I believe, symbol that represents the hero's journey, and it starts here and then it comes here, and it's almost like a beginning of a spiral. And the idea is that you start at home and you go on your journey and you face all these trials and all of these challenges and all these scary beasts along the way. And then when you return to home, you're at a different part of the spiral because you've grown. And so even though you're in the same place, you are not the same person in the same place.
Right.
And so the idea is that when there is a challenge, when there is a fear, when there is something getting in your way, you have the opportunity to grow through it. But so many of us see that challenge and then we retreat right back to home. We retreat right back to what we know to be comfortable for us, even if it is uncomfortable. So when we're talking about
comfortable because it's familiar.
It's familiar.
We retreat to the familiar.
Yes.
So this gets into stuff we talked about.
Alchemist.
Body.
Yes.
The Alchemist is big one. We've been talking about the body and the alignment and everything. Now we're starting to talk about mind, and your mind is really in charge of this whole thing. And a huge portion of your mind is not conscious at all. In fact, only 5% of our neural activity is conscious. That we are only aware of 5% of what's actually going on.
Right. 95%, you guys.
Is
95%.
Totally outside of our sphere of awareness. So that's a big part of what we talk about, and what we try to get you to become aware of, some of those things that are in your subconscious.
Yeah. All of our beliefs are held in our sub. And I also want to say our subconscious minds are our bodies. They're not driven by our bodies. They are our bodies. Mm-hmm. So we have these unconscious reactions to things that we don't even recognize. We have beliefs that we have absorbed into our bodies, into our subconscious minds, from just walking through the world. You know, we see people look a certain way and those people get the things that we want to get, and we're like, well, in order to get those things, we have to look this way. And so then we manipulate our bodies to look that way. Women, not just women, people, we suck in all the time because somebody who got married to an attractive person or whatever it had flat abs, and so we're walking around sucking in all the time. And man, there are some big implications for that too. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's amazing how much we are driven without even recognizing it by all of these beliefs that then affect our bodies, because our bodies are our subconscious minds. And so when we have a thought about, like, you know, I should look like this, our bodies, before we even think about it consciously, are already sucking in.
Right.
And the thing that we were going to talk about with that is so how many of us have been told that we're breathing high, or make sure you're breathing low? Your shoulders shouldn't move when you're breathing.
Right.
The reason that this happens.
We're supposed to breathe low as singers.
Yeah, right. The reason that this happens, the only reason your body is capable of breathing high is because you're tightening low. There is no other possible way for your body to expand high. Your body wants to expand low.
Just watch a baby breathing. That's where they expand every time they breathe.
Yeah, so it's a lack of relaxation in the core muscles that is causing us to breathe high. It's tightness, it's tension, right? And engagement in different ways. This is happening because we are trying to look a certain way. If we are trying to look a certain way, and that is preventing us from taking air into our bodies, the unconscious belief we have is that it is more important for us to impress the people around us than it is for us to breathe. To breathe, you guys. Is that not astounding? And we never think about that. We just think, okay, I got to breathe lower. But the people who are told to breathe low and are told that they're breathing high all the time, they're never told why they're breathing high all the time. They're never told that they're tightening their cores and that's what's making them breathe high all the time. They're just doing it unconsciously because this is how they walk through the world.
Right. And so until we bring those unconscious beliefs about who we are and what we do, until we can shed some light and illuminate what those unconscious thoughts are, we can't really do anything effectively to change them. So one of those unconscious beliefs that most of us have as singers is that high notes are hard and high notes are scary, right? That's just kind of like, it's just taken for granted. So what if they weren't hard though? What if high notes were actually easy? And what if we could just make them easy and sing them easy?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that I love to do this is through something, I coined a term here because I haven't found a better term for it, but you hear people talk about visualizing all the time, where like basketball players will visualize a free throw, or you visualize something that you really want to achieve in your life, or whatever the case might be. With singing, we have audiating. With any kind of music, we have audiating. So imagining what the sound is that you want to produce, imagining the pitch that you want to produce, the tone, the overall color of that sound. But then also, when we talk about the kinesthetic sense, when we talk about the way we want something to feel, my term for that is kinesthetizing, imagining what you want that to feel like. So when we sing a high note, not just are we trying to listen ahead of time for what we want that to sound like, but I want you to also think about, what do you want it to feel like? And because so often we just assume that a high note is hard work, so then our body just naturally makes it hard. We tighten all of those core muscles, we squeeze, we tense up, and we make it hard, and it doesn't sound the way that we want it to sound. And then we get down on ourselves because I have to just work harder. I must not be working hard enough to make this happen. So let's see what happens if we flip that on its head a little bit. And we won't start super high. We'll start somewhere right around here. And we're just gonna go and as we go along, I'm gonna give a little bit of a pause in between each one, and I want you to just take a second and audiate it, meaning imagine what you want that sound to be, and then kinesthetize it. Imagine what you want that sensation to be.
Yeah. Leah said, I tend to think low notes are hard.
Same thing can apply.
Yeah, I would be willing to bet that you are a soprano, because many of us struggle with low notes. Same exact thing. So imagine what it feels like for your low notes to be resonant and full and free and easy and just so released.
Exactly. The same, actually, a lot of times we have the same issues with low notes that we do with high notes. We try to push for more sound. We try to push for that to be, big and bold and beefy and juicy. And in doing so, we actually constrain the voice and hold it back from achieving its full capacity. So just allow for those low notes to fall out the same way that we allow for these high notes to fall out. Let's see what happens. Okay, here we go. second. Now, I'm a baritone, so I'm not going to have the same high notes, obviously, as a tenor or a soprano, but
I've been a baritone for about a week. I've had a cold, and I'm not any higher than he is.
we can still play with some ideas here, and I want y'all to just kind of check in as we move forward. Watch what is happening in your core muscles here. See what kind of habituated reactions you have as we go higher and higher. What happens to those core muscles?
Yeah.
Do they want to grab? Do they want to squeeze? Do they want to push? What happens to the muscles here in your throat?
Yeah.
Usually they're connected.
Absolutely. I just want to answer one thing real quickly that Leah said. She said she's trying to feel that. She's trying to feel the sense of fullness and release in her low notes. I just want to make one point again for sopranos. I mean, mezzos too, I guess, but we will not feel the same sensation in our low that we feel in our high. We can't. It's not how frequency works. There are books written about this that are much more like in depth than I have any desire to go right now, or that we would ever have time to go in a single workshop. But know that it is okay for you not to feel the same sensations when you're singing low than when you sing high.
Yeah.
Especially if you feel a lot of resonant sensation, like, in your cheekbones and your face and your fascia up there. You won't feel the same in your
quite
low.
the same, unless you're like a basso profundo. But let's keep moving. Let's keep moving up here and just be aware of those sensations and those tendencies to grab if you have them, and just take another second to say, no, I don't want to feel that. I want to feel easy. I want this to feel full. I want this to feel just full and easy and effortless.
Yeah.
And then sing into it that way.
If the thing that you notice is that you're trying to hold in at your core, what happens if you just allow yourself to take up the space that is for your body? You get to expand. No one's trying to encroach on that. Just fill yourself up and go.
Let's try it. It's about where I top out as a baritone, but you can keep going here.
Let us know what you felt in your bodies. And let us know how that felt for you overall. If it was good, if it felt freer, if it felt like you were allowed to use your voice.
Or do you find, you may find that, again, trying something new takes practice. And so just because you tell yourself it's going to be easy, sometimes that's all it takes. And I've had a lot of success with this one in my students that, oh, you mean I can just think it's going to be easy, and it will be, but it's not 100% of the time, obviously. So if you find that you have some really hardwired tendencies to grab, to hold, to work hard to make those high notes happen, then still falling off the beam, that's okay. Totally. That's okay.
Old habits die hard.
This is something to start putting into practice. If you found that it worked a little bit for you, great, keep going with it. If it did nothing for you, that's okay too. You can toss this one away, and we're going to move on to something else now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I believe Lindsay mentioned earlier, and one of the things that we have wanted to discuss, we talked about this idea that energy centers or chakras guide how our bodies work technically, right? So the one of the chakras that people tend to struggle with is the throat chakra. The throat chakra or energy center is where we experience communication, right? Which makes sense. This is where your larynx is. This is where the energy in your body wants to move out through speech, through communication. And so very often we find blockages here when we're singing. And the reason is that we have a sound expectation in our minds that is creating different technical habits, like trying to overdarken the sound by pulling down on the tongue root, and we get the sound rather than this sound, right?
or trying to sound like somebody else. This is a real common thing, is that we hear somebody else sing a song and I want to sing that song too, or I want to sound like that person. And so we try to mimic the sound of somebody else's voice rather than allowing the natural sound of our own voice. And this is something humans mimic very, very effectively. That's actually, there's all kinds of stuff about why, humanity has evolved the way that we have, because of our ability to mimic other sounds and mimic each other. And there's all sorts of evolutionary reasons why we can do that really well. But as singers, we end up finding that this can create some problems, because we try to manufacture an artificial voice that is not able to be sustained for long periods of time.
This is why we have an entire generation of people who try to talk like Britney Spears, and we have all kinds of vocal fry, which might not sound that much different from my normal speaking voice right now, because I sound like a giant walking nose. But we all kind of know that pattern, that we hear a pop singer do something, and then an entire generation is trying to sound like that pop singer, or any number of things.
Right.
We're always trying to sort of sound the way that we think is the right way to sound, and the right way to sound is just the released, opened version of ourselves.
Right way to sound is maybe, I think we think in terms of right and wrong with so many things, as though it's this black and white issue. And your voice is incredibly dynamic, and it can do so many different things. It can make so many different colors. And depending on the style of music that you're singing, right or wrong is going to be very, very different.
Right.
And so really thinking about it more as what is artistically effective, and what is what's going to be sustainable physically, what's going to be sustainable for my voice to be able to do, night after night after night. So this, we talked about body, we talked about mind. This idea of kind of working with the voice through these energy centers, through these chakras, is really where we start to think about this as spirit, as your sense of self. And this is separate from any kind of spiritual tradition or religious tradition or anything like that. We're not trying to advocate one way or the other in that way, but this is what we think of as spirit, is your sense of who you are, your core essence.
Yes.
And so this is one of the ways that that just recently we've started, and you especially have started to really teach through this lens.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about how this manifests in the way that we sing?
Yeah.
And what we can do about it?
I have my singers very often create different affirmations for different points in their bodies where they experience different types of energy. For this specific spot, since that's the one that we're talking about, I will have them say things like, I communicate freely and clearly, and I will have them say this out loud before they sing.
Actually give voice to it.
Yes, absolutely. I am allowed to use my voice authentically. Red said it's our voices that are authentic to us. And again, that doesn't mean like you only have this one color that you're allowed to produce. You have an amazingly dynamic voice, as Graham said. If you're belting, you're not going to sound the same as if you're singing a Puccini aria or something like that. So understanding that authentic to you does not just mean one color, but allowing your body to get out of the way of that through finding freedom in the emotional energy that comes from this spot. This spot, we tend to lock up here when we're scared to say something, when there's an authority figure, or when there's someone we have a crush on and we want to ask them out, and everything tends to get kind of stuck right here, right? So finding freedom, finding affirmations that will guide us toward freedom here. My voice is open and honest and free and beautiful, right? And then we sing. And just saying those words, it's amazing how quickly our voices transform when we affirm that, whether or not we actually believe this to be true. And we go into all of the reasons for all of this to work as well. But whether or not we believe it to be true, saying those words and recognizing where our bodies want to react, where our bodies want to fight us on those words, and releasing all of that worry, saying those words about freeing your voice will change how you sing.
Mhm. Mhm. Let's give it a try.
Yeah.
So let's do that same, we can try that same high note
Yeah.
exercise actually.
Absolutely. So everyone come up with some affirmation. This can be, I love the sound of my voice. I am free to communicate or to express myself through my voice. I am open to whatever comes out of my body via my voice. Any affirmation that feels freeing to you, go ahead and say it, and then let's sing and see what happens.
My voice can express what I feel easily and freely. Good. Did that feel any different for you all? Did you notice just having that affirmation, having that, giving yourself that permission to be unrestricted? Did that make a difference for anybody? Let us know in the chat what you felt there. So the last one that I want to hit on real quick here is a heart-based approach to singing, and this is the difference between singing from an emotional place and singing from a technique place. And so I want to have you all sing. We're just going to choose something real simple that hopefully everybody knows. We're going to choose This Little Light of Mine, and we're just going to, the first time through, I want you to sing with your focus on what is the sound that I'm making. You know, am I getting the right shape of my pharynx? Am I getting the right resonance that I want? Am I using my breath the right way? If you think in terms of placement, are you placing your voice the right way? Make sure that you're getting it right, okay? And we can pick some sort of a key. Let's go a little. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Okay, take stock of what that felt like. Take stock of what that experience was. Now, we're gonna forget about all of the technique stuff, and you're gonna sing this from the standpoint of what this song means to you emotionally. Okay, so this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, is just like that affirmation that you were using to allow your voice to be free, to allow your voice to be heard, to not withhold anything, to allow that vulnerability to express who you are. Feel what that feels like. Feel the freedom that comes from that, and feel the joy that comes from that. And let's try that again and see what happens to your voice, see what happens to the way that you approach it musically. Most importantly, see how you feel about it. Okay? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Cool.
Talk to us about the difference.
Let us know what that was like. What did you notice? What was the difference between heart-centered singing and technique-centered singing? Put it in the chat. Let us know what you experienced there. And then, so we mentioned, it's fun, right? Leah says it's fun. I mean, it's way more fun to sing when you're emotionally invested in what you're singing. Nobody really enjoys getting up on stage and having to worry about their technique. That's nerve-wracking. It's daunting. It's not fun at all to do that.
And it's not what it's about. Nobody is ever moved by perfect technique. We are moved by the impact that music can have on us when we are out of the way. But so often as performers, and I will absolutely tell you I am the most guilty of this, and it took until probably 7 years ago that I kind of realized all of this, that we get up on stage and we think, okay, this has to be perfect for the audience. And the audience doesn't care about perfection. They don't get pulled into perfection. It's not about us when we're on the stage. It's about the transformation that we engender in them, that we inspire in them. It is about them feeling something, and they feel something when we feel something.
Right. And we have whole classes on exactly that thing.
Man,
when you have an emotional reaction to something, if you have an emotional, whatever your emotional state is actually being broadcast to everybody else around you. Your heart creates this electromagnetic field that they can measure, and it can communicate what your emotional state is to the people around you. When we're singing, and feeling that emotion, authentically experiencing that emotion in the moment, it changes the way that we sing, but it also changes the way that we're communicating that experience to our audience and allowing them to vicariously live that experience with us, which is, I mean, that's when we're performing, that's what we're there to do.
Mirror neurons. Yeah, Lindsay, mirror neurons. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So, like we said, these are just little snippets of the stuff that we do with our singers all the time, that we do through our holistic vocal training, and we also deal with career mentorship for professional singers and pre-professional singers. If you got something out of this, then we talked about in the email that I sent out about this workshop, and the post that I put in our group about the workshop was that you get a big free gift at the end. So you have to answer a question for us to get that free gift, and all that question is what did you gain out of this workshop? And so if you can email that question, the answer to that question, to our email address, it's sfyl@singforyourlives.com. I'll put it here in the chat.
I got it.
Email us what you got out of this out of this workshop, and we'll get you set up with a free vocal exploration session where we can help you to figure out what are the things that are holding you back from expressing yourself fully and freely and truly. And how is that going to help you not only sing better, but live better and move through the world in a more productive way, in a more joyful way? And that's basically what we do. That's what Sing for Your Lives is all about, is making the world a better place, one person at a time, by helping you discover your voice and therefore discover yourself. So, and if you feel like this was helpful and you want to explore what it might look like to work in either our to work with us in either our vocal coaching program or our career mentorship program, let us know in that email, and we'll set up another time to talk through what that might look like for you. Thank you all so much for coming today.
Thank you.
This was a joy for us. Hopefully you got something, that you all got something out of this. And we look forward to working with you all again in the future and seeing you at more of these as we go along.
Yeah.